I'm Missy Smith of Wake Up, Women Against the Killing and Exploitation of Unprotected Persons. I started Wake Up almost 30 years ago with 4 other women when we found out about the trafficking of baby body parts and were horrified. And since then, it's taken me on a journey that has been very, very interesting, exciting, surprising, shocking, but informative. This particular occasion, I'd like to speak about chastity and how I got involved with the chastity movement and what I know about it. It started really with a forced abortion, a divorce, a remarriage, a death of a beloved son, and a trip to Medjugorje. Medjugorje is a little town, a little teeny village actually, in Croatia. And I went after our son John had a massive heart attack and died. And the graces that came from that were almost immediate when I returned. At the time, there wasn't a direct route. So I went from Dulles Airport to Paris, and Paris to Split to the little village, and came in the middle of the night during the war. And there were no, the roads were just dirt. There were some grapevines, and there were some actual little miracles that we saw, and we were continually told not to really focus on the miracles, but on the spiritual journey. So we attended Mass twice a day, we said the rosary all day, we went to confessions constantly, and then there was the return to reality, and then there was the doors that opened that were amazing, absolutely startling. I did things that I had never thought of that I would do. When I found out about the trafficking of baby body parts, I really believed that I had the silver bullet, that nobody would have an abortion. There was not a woman in the world that would have an abortion if she realized that these little tiny babies were being cut up and sold like pieces of a car. And I was naive. It turned out that it was revealed to me later on that it was, an exorcist told me that it was Satan's sacrament. And that gave me a completely different perspective. It was a while that I still didn't put together the component of chastity and purity and how important it was in terms of abortion. Maureen Flynn and Ted have the International Week of Prayer and Fasting, and they every so often would have Our Lady of America on the cover of the magazine. And I didn't really focus in until about the second or third time that I saw the picture of Our Lady of America, and I read the articles. And most importantly, I read her messages. And her messages to Sister Mary Ephraim were shocking. And basically, the Blessed Mother said, if in fact her bishops, her sons the bishops, solemnly process her into the Basilica of the Shrine of the Immaculate Conception, that America would lead the world in chastity and purity. And I was shocked. I said, this is it. Again, I thought I had the silver bullet. And so at least 15 or more years, I did promote Our Lady of America, and actually went by where Sister Mary Ephraim lived in Rome City, Indiana, and went to the chapel where Our Lady appeared to her and gave her her messages. I had gone to Notre Dame to protest. Obama was giving the graduation speech, and he was being honored. So we stopped. We had a press conference up at the bishop's place, and then on the way back, stopped in Rome City, and we were given a tour of the location and the chapel, and that it was lovely. And we came back and did our thing and protested, and I was arrested on 2 different occasions and went to jail, St. Joseph's Jail, and then came back and did street theater. And I ultimately I had a radio program called Chastity, the New Sexual Revolution. But all of this was connected, I believe. I believe that it was the graces that came from going to Medjugorje. It's not a luxury trip. But it is a spiritual journey, and I think the Blessed Mother gave me enormous graces and gave me enormous opportunities. So for 2.5 years, I had a radio program called Chastity, the New Sexual Revolution. And on that, I interviewed chastity speakers from all over the country. And it was really great fun. It was an interesting little sojourney. And but I felt again the enormity of the perversion in our society, that the answer was very obvious, that if America could go back to being chaste and pure, that we would eliminate all the perversion. The hard part, again, which I was naive about, was that the bishops I felt like it wouldn't be hard. The Blessed Mother didn't give us any specific amount of people, bishops that we were to have. So even a couple would be good. But we have not been able to get her statue into the shrine and honored there. But we have continued with chastity, and I have actually there were 2 beautiful books that were made into beautiful little pamphlets. One is for little girls called Princess and the Kiss, which is really lovely, and how to promote chastity and purity with the little children, because that is a challenge, and it does start with little children, and how to speak with children. And this one is the Squire and the Scroll, which is about the squire. And I have pictures of my 2 children, 2 of my children. I have more, but I thought those were very appropriate. And I think the theology of the body is something that was rather new. John Paul II started in 1979 every Wednesday giving a talk, and Christopher West ultimately compiled all the talks about the theology of the body, because it had never been addressed before. People hadn't really spoken about, there was no knowledge about the theology about God and the body, and how God created the body, and that how the complementary of the man and the woman, and the beauty of both, and the love that we all really seek. So I would suggest anybody who's interested, the John Paul II Institute has many talks on chastity and specifically on the theology of the body. I would encourage people to look into that. That is a very interesting. They have podcasts and on every issue imaginable around the purity of the heart, and masturbation and pornography and all the things that plague our society now. But there's no doubt that with chastity, it would remove the perversion that exists now in our society, which is overwhelming. With that, a dear friend who's now passed away, Dick Retta, and myself worked for 3.5 years on a magazine which we named Chastity, the New Sexual Revolution. And it's being made as we speak into a book. And it's dedicated to Saint Philomena, who I have a great devotion to. She was a great little saint of 13 years old, and Diocletian wanted to marry her. Her parents were royalty, and she refused, saying that she had dedicated her life to Christ. And so he did have her tortured, and many miracles have come out of that. Absolute fantastic miracles. She was dragged through the streets and thrown in the Tiber, and there were 2,000 people watching. And the angels came and cut the chains that were on her, and cut away the anchor that was to hold her down. And that day there were 2,000 conversions to Christianity as she rose from the Tiber. Diocletian thought that she was a witch, because every time he would see her, she would become more and more beautiful. This actually, Janie Garza, is a mystic who Philomena appears to her. She says this is exactly what she looks like. So her relics are in Magnano, Italy, and she's very beautiful and very inspiring. And I have gotten a lot of things accomplished with this little saint, who's the saint of the end times and the wonder worker. So one of the very interesting things happened with Saint Philomena was I had gotten a call from a friend, a pro-life friend, who had seen on a ham radio the fact that a baby had been found in a toilet in a Ruby Tuesdays restaurant in Upper Marlboro, and she wondered if it was connected to abortion. And so I went about calling the medical examiner to see if there had been a baby doe, and there was, and he said it was a girl. And I said I wanted to make a Good Samaritan offer to have her remains, have a mass, and have her buried. And he told me to find out about the detective who was on the case. They were very worried that the woman who gave birth at the Ruby Tuesdays in the bathroom might bleed to death. So they put a bulletin out for her. Ultimately, the detective did find her, and I asked him to ask her if she wanted to be involved. I was going to move on trying to get her remains and then have a funeral for her and a burial. And she said no, she didn't want to have anything to do with it. So the detective was very, very sympathetic, very kind. He was really terribly upset. He said the baby had a full head of hair. She was very, very developed and had fingernails. And so it took a while because to get her remains. And immediately I named her Philomena and asked Saint Philomena to help me. I was in uncharted waters. I didn't really know how to go about obtaining her remains. I really didn't know what I was doing, but I was depending on Saint Philomena. And she helped me. She helped me open doors, ask and you shall receive. And it was during COVID, so there was a bit of confusion about it because, everything was shut down and even the churches were shut down. But there was a funeral director that Jack Ames knew, and when I signed legal papers, all the doors opened. The morticians were very, very fearful of picking up her remains and then being sued. And I said that I wasn't afraid of being sued, and I would sign legal papers and take responsibility for that. So at the March for Life at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, her remains were acquired by this particular mortician. And then ultimately we did have a beautiful mass, which Bishop Coffey celebrated, and then it was con-celebrated with Father Bill Kaczynski from West Virginia and Father Meeks. And then she was buried outside the door of the church in a little garden of innocence, which they have renovated, and it's quite beautiful. And so St. Philomena and her chastity and purity have motivated me in a great way to talk about chastity, to write about it, to speak about it, and even to take my magazine and put it into a hardback book, which will be a coffee table, full color book on chastity and purity. And there have been miracles around Philomena. A young woman could not get pregnant, and she would go to the Garden of Innocence, and she would pray and ask Philomena to help her. And one day she was leaving, and someone's, she said to a passerby, and pray for me. My husband and I really want to have a child. And the woman was a Eucharistic minister. And she said, well, I was older when I got married, and I was fearful that I would never be able to have children. And a priest took a pyx with the host in it, consecrated, and prayed over my womb. And I was able to have children. And she said, would you get out of your car and I'll do that. Would you like me to pray over you? And she said, yes. And so she prayed and put the Eucharist on her womb. And 2 weeks later, she was pregnant. And she had a little girl that she named Philomena Grace. So there have been many wonderful things in the spiritual world that have come about. And so in terms of chastity and purity, I think that going to Medjugorje was certainly launched me in the right direction, filled me with grace, and then I think that learning about and really looking into the theology of the body, thinking of it in that way, was really an eye-opener. And I really encourage people to do that, because it's out there and it can be easily attained on the internet. The John Paul II Institute has all of those podcasts that are very educational. And then again, the radio show was an interesting array of pro-life speakers. We had a team of speakers come to the John Paul Institute, which now the Knights of Columbus own, and for quite a while they would speak on chastity. So my focus has been on, it's multifaceted. I ran for Congress in Washington, and it's so that I could show advertisements and show the victims of abortion, because if you can get on the federal ballot, you can do ads showing the victims of abortion without being edited or censored. So there's been a lot of activism in my last 30 years. But again, I fall back to saying that with chastity and purity, all the evils that exist now that plague our society really will be erased. And the more knowledge people have about it, and the earlier they can start talking to their children. There's actually a whole article in here about speaking to your children and how to speak to your children and start planting the seeds of chastity with little children. It's obvious that, you are not going to speak to a child the same way you would as a young adult. But we have to move forward because the entertainment industry is pretty overpowering with young people. And we have to pray and fast because there is oxytocin is a hormone, and it can be activated by touch. It can be it's usually activated by breastfeeding and etc. But I know with couples, and if they want to be pure, they really need to go to mass, go to confession. They need to pray. They need to be careful because you can bond very, very easily, very quickly, and oxytocin is very strong. And if you're a very special. Human beings are very, very special, and if they want to stay pure, they have to pray and get the grace because it is a dangerous world out there in terms of purity of heart, and I think it's something that everybody should encourage their children and educate them on the sacredness of marriage, the sacredness of sex, the sacredness of the human body, and that we were all created by God, and that at the moment of conception, we're ensouled. We have a soul at the very, very moment of conception. So all of that preciousness needs to be imbued to our children when they're small, as they're growing up. And I don't think prior to the theology of the body, I don't think that happened. I mean, I grew up in a very Irish Catholic family, but we really didn't talk about it. I mean, and of course, I know my parents grew up, they would be way over 100 now, so they had not been spoken to by their parents and encouraged or educated. And yet, the church was different then, and the church, they were very strict Catholics. I'm sure that both my father and mother were virgins when they got married, but and I lived in a very Leave It to Beaver world. It was dinner for 10 every night, but the 60s hit, and my three younger, there were four older and then three younger. The three youngers really, they got hit with the 60s craziness, and I think in some ways they're still crazy. So, but they're good people. It's just that society is and the entertainment industry, it's a societal thing. It's very big. And who would have ever thought that we would be discussing whether a woman was actually a woman, or that men would be playing in women's sports, or that we would have abortion on demand, or actual marriage between two men and two women. I mean, these are things that were unimaginable in the 50s and prior to that. But, it was a perfect storm. Things were coming slowly. I always say I went to school with 400 girls, and we knew the girls that were having sex outside of marriage. I mean, we could instinctually knew who they were. And there were a handful of them maybe. Now it's completely the opposite. It'd be very hard to find a virgin out of 100 girls. And maybe out of boys it wouldn't be, I don't know. But I think that if we can, with the help, the grace of God, and with, we can turn back this tide of evil, and this tide of perversion. All perversion could be eradicated with chastity and purity. So I encourage everyone to look into the John Paul Institute on the theology of the body, and study it and listen to it and think about it. And I encourage everyone to really pray about purity of heart, because I think I know that that's the answer. So I think that's something that the takeaway from this is that the Blessed Mother has asked for it on many occasions. She has said, as her promise from Our Lady of America, under the title of Our Lady of America, she has said, if her bishops solemnly process her into the Basilica of the Shrine of the Immaculate Conception and then honor her there, that America will lead the world in chastity and purity. And I believe that this Saint Carlo Acutis is a big part of this, because Saint Francis, appeared to his mother and said that when he was canonized, which was September 7th, 2025, that an army of young saints will rise up the world has never seen. So I think that St. Francis also said that the Holy Spirit would shower graces all over the world. So I'm very encouraged. Although I know that there is grave evil, I believe sincerely in my heart that we're very, very close to overcoming that evil. And as that's happening, I encourage everyone who looks at this video to think about what I've said, think about the resources, purchase the book, Chastity, The New Sexual Revolution, because I think we're moving into that. I know we're moving into that. So anyway, thank you for listening.